call this meeting to order at 10:36. It's the 250th meeting of the Equal Employment Practices Commission. And we're live streaming to the EPC staff, and we're also recording this in compliance with the Open Meetings Law to be posted on our website subsequently. First order of business will be the roll call of commissioners by our Executive Director, Jean Victor.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to take the roll call. Chair Aldrin Bonilla.
Present.
Vice Chair and Mayoral appointee Commissioner Elaine Reese.
Present.
We have a new commissioner today, and a mayoral appointee, Vanessa Alcantara.
Present.
Also attending the meeting, we have EEPC staff, Jen Shaw, Executive Agency Counsel and Director of Compliance.
Present.
Letizia Gambrell Bloom, Director of Research Initiatives and Public Hearings.
Present.
And me, I'm Jean Victor, the Executive Director of the EEPC.
And Angel.
Thank you. And we have a very important guest, which is a guest now, right? Commissioner Emeritus Angela Cabrera is joining us as well. So I just want to say for those viewing as well, we received guidelines and guidance around open meetings, and in addition to social distancing, the guidelines require that we wear masks. So I don't want anybody viewing to make any assumptions around vaccinations or not. This is just pursuant to the guidelines issued. Next, we'll go to the approval of the minutes.
I
The
move
minutes
to
of
approve
June 10th, 2021. Do we have a motion?
I move to approve the minutes, the meeting of the minutes of June 10, 2021.
We have a motion from Commissioner Reese. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second from Commissioner Alcantara. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion to approve the minutes passes. Next order of business, we have old business. And as part of old business, I see a section here where I remind everyone that our next meeting is August 19th. If everyone could look at their calendars, either today or let us know after the meetings, if there's any inconvenience for any of the
I'm
commissioners.
probably gonna have to zoom in. I won't be in present, but I can zoom in.
Okay, so we'll get guidance from our agency council
I think it's WebEx.
around the
I'll-
possibility of that.
I'll see if it's possible because we're now required to have in-person meetings once again. So I'll check to see what the guidance says for.
Well, you won't have a quorum unless your WebEx is beginning.
Okay.
So it's really very simple.
Or we may have to reschedule, we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, if they won't let us WebEx in, we won't be able to have a quorum. The city council could do us a favor and appoint either one of the two vacancies they have open.
So we'll see once we get guidance on that. Any additional old business? I know from the minutes, and I
Actually,
mentioned.
to the chair, I know that the two Commissioner Reese's and Rice did recommend to the city council someone for a position. The last I knew, they were looking at a particular person, so I really think maybe it's somebody just getting to the city council appointments. If one of us gets sick, we can't have a meeting. It's crazy.
I've also recommended and I've been in contact with their general counsel, and they're moving on it.
Okay, it's just silly.
Now, in terms of old business, I mentioned to Executive Director Jean Victor that in our minutes, it mentions that Commissioner Reese raised two issues at last month's meeting that required follow-up. The first one was to inquire about the jurisdiction of the EEPC, in particular New York Public Libraries. And there was some past research or a memoranda on that or something that you were going to communicate to us.
Yeah, so I looked into the prior files of prior council in regards to our jurisdiction over libraries. Now, EPC was created by the 1989 charter amendments, and shortly thereafter, opinion 1190 was issued by the law department that spoke to the city's jurisdiction over, entities that were established pursuant to state law, or by state law, to determine whether or not these hybrid entities were under our jurisdiction. In that opinion, there was a definition that specifically excluded the public libraries, and so the rest of the opinion with regard to our applicability of our chapter 36, to public libraries was not addressed. Subsequent to that, prior council provided an opinion to the former executive director, Abraham May, that indicated that based upon a number of the criteria that were raised in the opinion 1190 to determine whether or not the EPC has jurisdiction, that it most likely does not have jurisdiction. The libraries are privately managed nonprofit corporations. Their expenses for settlement and adjudication of lawsuits are not covered by the city treasury, and the law department does not provide any legal guidance or representation. The employees of the libraries have been found through case law historically to not be considered employees of the city or state, and the libraries have been deemed not a public employer under the Taylor Law, which is the civil service laws. It is they're non-for-profit corporations, and I did find that the New York Public Library considers itself a contractor with the city and not necessarily part of the city. That being said, there is the fact that part of their money, part of their treasury, comes from the city treasury. So I can do some more digging if you'd like me to. I'm happy to do that. Alternately, we've never specifically asked the law department to opine on whether or not we have jurisdiction. In the past, we've asked them to provide us with guidance with regards to district attorneys and the community colleges, both the senior and the community level. So we can do that if we'd like, or we can just continue with the precedent that we've had, which is we've never, since 1989, we have not audited the city libraries.
I'm gonna make it wider before we narrow it. Why don't we ask the law department, since the issue is, where I was coming from, is that the city treasury provides funding to these not-for-profits. Why don't we just ask the law department the broader question, which is where the city treasury provides funding to the not-for-profits, such as the public library and the museums, because there are a whole host of museums. What's our obligation, if any, to audit those employees? And then once we get that opinion, which I suspect will be, we have none, we will just file it. But I don't wanna
We will just what? I didn't hear the last
we
part.
will just file it, keep it in the files.
Okay.
My assumption is that it will come back saying that they are not city employees, we therefore do not have an obligation to audit them. But I'd like to have that, because there are several different questions that are being raised about those entities and their practices in hiring and promoting. So let's just get out of having an obligation. They clearly have their own issues as to discrimination.
Now, in terms of my own edification, for the criteria set forth for jurisdiction, is it and clauses or and or?
So, the thing is, the city charter, chapter 36, which is our chapter, it defines what is under our jurisdiction very broadly. And on its face, it would include the libraries. However, the opinion 1190 that was issued by the law department shortly after the amendments to the charter, they set forth their own arbitrary determination of whether or not there is jurisdiction of certain clauses, including ours, to certain entities that are quasi-state. So the law department determined that jurisdiction, and it's been kind of what we've been following based upon common sense of why we would have jurisdiction.
There are ambiguities, such as, we do community boards, we don't do any of the so-called 34th Street, it's not called a partnership, it is called a partnership, where they in fact get money from the city and money from the real estate interests of Gotham and take care of that, of the
The
streetscape.
not-for-profit corporations?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think,
But the problem here is that if you read chapter, it's anything where the city fisc provides support. The city fisc provides support for the libraries. The city fisc provides support for the museum. The city fisc provides support for every single one of those partnerships.
Well, interestingly enough, the opinion 1190 that set forth the jurisdiction over these quasi-state entities specifically said that the EPC does not have jurisdiction over Health and Hospitals Corporation, even though it was specifically listed in the definitions of our jurisdiction. So it's, I think it warrants reaching out to the law department and getting a more definitive guidance on it, because it has been quite some time. The memo that was provided to the former executive director was done in 2008. So the case law may have changed. There may have been changes in the governance. It's not really clear, so I think it warrants further investigation, either on our end and formally to the law department. I think it would be helpful to get that definitive answer.
Yes.
Also, because if we decide that if we get guidance from the law department that determines we do have jurisdiction and we start auditing these entities for the first time, it would be helpful to have something to.
You're gonna need something in writing.
Something
as you
to
go
back it up as to
forward,
why we're
otherwise you can't
coming
do it.
to visit after so many years of not visiting.
I suspect that the overriding factor here is employee,
Yes.
not fiscal revenue. So I suspect that DCAS has no personnel information on New York City Public Library employees, and thus it would not be possible for us to get from that
Yes, but they
centralized.
would have HHC.
Yes, that's
Well,
that would be a
HHC,
good question. I don't
they
know.
do have HHC, but because, I forget the specifics in 1190, but, Health and Hospitals Corporation, they're governed by state law. So there's some tie to that says that we as city entities don't have jurisdiction over their employment practices.
Oh,
Which, we have jurisdiction over NYCHA, and NYCHA is a creature of state law, but under city jurisdiction.
Right, and 1190 goes into great detail regarding why we have jurisdiction over certain entities and not others.
So what about the MTA?
MTA we do not.
And we also have no jurisdiction when we go into the colleges, community colleges, it's only of the non-pedagogical employees.
And it's
And
only
that's true of DOE as well.
and it's only the junior colleges.
Only
And only the
college.
We
junior
don't have
colleges,
jurisdiction over
not
the senior colleges.
Correct.
which are under the state jurisdiction. Anyway,
So I think,
I think it's time to have a new analysis.
yeah, but I think in addition to raising, issue around public libraries, I think we also have some long-standing other ones, particularly with the city council, for example, that we should just, revisit comprehensively with, those remaining,
Okay.
with the entities remaining. Or where there's a question.
But the city council's not the only one that says we don't have jurisdiction. We've had all sorts of other groups and entities over historically that decided, Consumer Affairs at one point decided the commissioner didn't like our jurisdiction.
So whichever ones are still outstanding, maybe we can just,
There's a few.
there's a few.
Perhaps we can collaborate and confirm we have everything that you want us to inquire about before we send that letter. There's a few.
More than, you would say, half dozen?
Well, there's
Question or
the-
jurisdiction?
There's the libraries and the museums. City council, we believe, and we have been auditing them as jurisdiction. And I found a couple of other smaller entities in my research. I don't remember them off the top of my head, because we haven't done them, so it hasn't been like part of our group of 141 entities. But I can look through and make sure that we haven't missed anything.
Do we do the Economic Development Corporation?
EDC, we do by consent.
We do by consent with
EDC and, the other,
EDC?
no board of elections, they're not under our
Well,
jurisdiction.
they clearly are state appointed.
Yeah.
They're state entities and they're politically appointed. I don't know.
EDC we do by consent, and there's another entity we do by consent, and it's been long standing that they consented to our audit.
Why don't you go through it?
Oh, sorry.
sorry, what, but it seems to be going through for where you think you can use the clarification or use an affirmative letter, just do the whole thing.
Okay.
With the city council,
Yes.
is it clear that it's under our jurisdiction, or is that something that you need to investigate?
So
It is clear that it is our jurisdiction. Their problem is a political problem, i.e. each of the city council members, each of the 51 has their own employee base, and there is no centralized control. That's their political problem. However, they are in charge and they pay them, and so it becomes our jurisdiction. It became very clear in our discussion.
Yeah, under the definition of our jurisdiction, they fall under our definition. The city council has made some informal, claims that they don't fall under our jurisdiction because they are a legislative branch. They really haven't fleshed out that position, so it has been difficult for us to determine whether or not that has any merit. But I know that was something that was raised at our last audit of the city council. We are re-auditing them because they didn't complete the last audit. They seem to be cooperating in terms of getting the audit completed, so I'm not sure if jurisdiction is still a question in their eyes, or if they're just, in their opinion, consenting to our jurisdiction. But I can definitely look into it further.
I mean, maybe we should be waiting also to see what we get back from them in terms of, in compliance with our requests.
Well, all of the documents that they've provided to us thus far in this audit have been, sent with a disclaimer that they are being sent voluntarily and not as voluntarily.
Okay.
And not as an obligation of the audit, but they are basically consenting to an audit. So, but they are sending us materials, they're working with our analysts, and, we'll see what happens.
They have communicated they're open to further discussion and they wanna have these discussions.
We had several discussions the last audit cycle, the first time we audited them, which was the first time in about 4 years, I believe. And we didn't really come to a consensus, but this audit cycle seems to be a little bit more on the same page, so.
The problem is because they are a legislative body, there tends not, and because we have term limits, there tends not to be a bureaucracy in place that remains from time to time. And that means there's a new learning each time you come in to audit them.
Any
So
other,
Can I ask?
yes,
Do we audit them as a full agency, or do we audit them independently? Because you said that each council member has their own
We
employees.
audit them as a full agency, we do not audit them
Okay.
independently.
Perfect.
Their issue is their own control issue.
Okay.
So we audit them, but for example, what we've been doing is a sexual harassment, audit. You are well aware, as I am, not from anything from an audit, that at least a council member has left council because of allegations of harassment. So it is, I think, that kind of issue that raises their political problem.
thank you. So, any other, old business?
Yeah, I think there was also a discussion about the audit standards that we were going to be adopting for the next round of auditing. Excuse me, I'm trying to project through the mass.
Yeah.
It's difficult to say the least.
We've been working as an agency to try to determine what would be the next best course of action. We currently are completing our sexual harassment audits, and we're looking at what we're going to focus on for the next round. What we're trying to accomplish is to ensure that the audit standards that we adopt for the next round will also help to inform the local law 13 report that we have to prepare at the same time. So we would like to make it very efficient so that we can use both. This also led to a review of our current audit standards, something that we haven't really focused on, at least as a group lately. We do have audit standards that relate to underutilization that we currently have on our books. They primarily center on recruitment. We wanted to see if there was something else that we could to kind of broaden that. So that's what we've been working on lately.
Do you know when you expect to have completed?
Yeah, we need to complete this sooner rather than later because we have to get so many things in place to get this ready to be launched for the next year. So we are expecting to have this pretty much finalized and presented around the time of the next meeting, which will be on August 19th.
So that would be like the schedule of the entities and the substance of
This
it.
substance of what we're going to ask.
Jean, could you send it out to us at least a week ahead?
Yes.
So that each of us has the ability to look at it and to read it and understand it, and perhaps even if we have questions even before the meeting, to get those back to you.
Absolutely.
Next order of business is item 4, new business, changes to the EEPC board. As everyone already knows, we've been joined by a new board member, appointed by New York City Mayor, Board Member Alcantara, Commissioner Alcantara. And we also, today is the last, is this when we're doing this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And today is the last commission meeting for Commissioner Cabrera.
Make me sad.
I know, you make us sad. And Commissioner Cabrera is probably the longest standing commissioner of the Equal Employment Practices Commission.
Absolutely.
Absolutely, right, without question. And, everyone's very thankful, and beginning with the highest person who's thankful, we have a little message from Mayor Bill de Blasio for you, a little note that maybe Jean Victor, Executive Director, can read and present. So we'll read it into the record as well.
Okay, thank you.
So, we received this letter from Mayor Bill de Blasio. It starts, Dear Ms. Cabrera, it is a pleasure to join with your colleagues in recognizing your tremendous contributions as you complete 24 years of exemplary service on the Board of Commissioners of New York City's Equal Employment Practices Commission. Since being appointed as an EEPC Commissioner in 1997, you have advanced its mission to ensure city agencies adhere to equal employment opportunity laws and establish inclusive, non-discriminatory workplaces that reflect the remarkable diversity of our city's 8.6 million residents. A proud Puerto Rican New Yorker, you have always demonstrated an unwavering commitment to uplift our vibrant Latino community, women, and all New Yorkers through your career as a public servant in our city and state, as well as through your work in the private sector and contributions to civic organizations and cultural institutions. As you reflect on everything you have accomplished at EEPC and beyond, I am delighted to add my voice to the chorus of well-wishers commending your efforts to protect and strengthen the vital workforce that powers the 5 boroughs and forge a fairer, brighter future for our great city. On behalf of all New Yorkers, thank you for your distinguished service. Please accept my best wishes for your continued success in all that you do. Sincerely, Bill de Blasio, Mayor.
That's lovely. Thank you very much.
I'm not sure if you guys have a newsletter or anything, and want to take a picture, but if you do.
It's beautiful, what a lovely thing, and thank you for
Yeah.
framing it. It's just so lovely.
We have this-
Oh, yeah, with Commissioner too.
With all the commissioners, you said?
Maybe,
Yes, yes,
I
Commissioner
love that.
Reese, Commissioner Alcantara.
yes.
And maybe we can stand up.
With our masks on.
Yes.
I better
Look
recognize
at,
it.
now with a mask
Should we
strangers.
invite Arva, Commissioner Rice?
Yeah, sure.
Yes.
No, Arva. Just the
Oh,
commissioners.
yes, yes.
Just the commissioners, Arva's in the,
Oh, okay.
Arva's usually.
Oh, but she's with us all the time. You're
Has
part of
Arva,
us.
has Arva gone through life being overbooked?
time flies, huh?
She's on a
24 years, my goodness
God,
gracious.
it's been a long time. I thought it was only 20.
Wow. Well, you probably threw the other 4 under
She's
the
on a
bus.
call.
Oh, she's on the call.
She's on the
Okay.
call.
Okay.
So she said she'll come. And we can do this after as well.
Should be out without the mask.
Yeah. This is the before and after. Okay.
Is mine?
Yes.
Yes,
So
you
we
can.
can,
That's why he had
you
it
can have
framed.
it- do you have it send
You
it to
can
me
hang
later?
it, my
Yeah,
dear.
but,
That's very
Yeah.
nice.
Pipe up.
We'll do other news.
I'm still in the camera, so I can edit this part out.
There's an organization in Rosarno called Cento, and they came to interview me because they're starting to collect all of the important Hispanics that have been working so much and so long in the city of New York. And they interviewed me for about two hours.
Wow.
And so my place looks like a mess because I have so many things around. It's unbelievable. So I have all my awards now in one place and papers and all that. And I never, thank you so much.
You
It
put
was
it
such
next
a
to your
pleasure.
Robert Kennedy picture.
Yes, and I used to work for Senator Robert Kennedy and the first elected governor of Puerto Rico. Among others, Cuomo, all the others is wonderful.
I think you should write a book.
Everybody's after me to do that.
You should.
Or at the very least, do an oral history.
We'll
Get in
see.
front of a tape recorder.
So at this point, any other colleagues or UPC staff would like to say a few words, or Commissioner Reese? And then, if Commissioner Cabrera wanted to say a few more words, and then we'll go on to the next agenda item.
Angela, it has been a pleasure working with you.
Well, thank
all
you.
these
It's
years.
wonderful to make friends here.
We
It's
made
been
friends.
wonderful. And this is such an important organization, and it's been really a wonderful thing for me to be involved. Of course, I got involved in the beginning because I was angry at what was going on. So I'm glad that I've been here all this time. And God bless all of you. We need you. We really do. Thank you so much.
But thank you for all you've done.
I'm gonna miss you.
We're gonna miss you too.
Couldn't be a long time.
We want to thank you for your public service. You know, I know you've been asked probably several times, why in the world would you want to do this? I know it comes with sacrifice, sometimes headaches, sometimes the idea of let someone else do it. But you know, the fact that you stepped up to the plate for as long as you have, on the tough issues that you have, make us all better people and make New York City a better place for all residents to live. And you know, we thank you for your service.
I think that this organization is so important, so keep it going. It's really, really much needed. Still. Thank you.
Thank you. The next order of business is the audit update. We'll return to Executive Director Jean Victor for status of sexual harassment prevention and response practices audits and the final determinations resolution to be voted upon.
Thank you. We have two resolutions, this month. Resolution number 2021AP/250-102 is New York City Council. And we have resolution number 2021AP/250-056 ex New York City Police Department. We have hard copies of the resolutions here with us today, and because we're meeting in person, after the meeting, we can sign off on the resolutions.
Before any discussion, do we have a motion to adopt resolutions, number 2021 AP, New York City Council, and resolution 2021 AP around the New York City Police Department?
I so move.
We have a motion from Commissioner Reese. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Alcantara. Any discussion?
I have a question on the New York City Council. Jennifer, it appeared that there were several cases where you had no answer from them. And your prior in conflict. Do you have response from them now as you're going into compliance, or you believe you will have response?
So we issued the PICs, which are the preliminary interview questions at the beginning of the year, and they did respond to some of our PICs and provided some documentation which we incorporated into our preliminary determination. They did not respond to the preliminary, but as an optional response, so agencies sometimes do not, they did not. We issued the final determination, which is the resolution that you're voting on, and we've since entered compliance monitoring. Their response to the final determination has not been due yet. It's due 30 days after the issuance of the final determination. So we're awaiting that response from them. In the meantime, we have been in contact with people at the council who have set up, we're setting up a call with them to discuss what needs to be done and next steps. So I'm hopeful that we will get a response to the final determination, and then we can work with them through compliance monitoring to make sure that they implement any of the remaining corrective actions.
But there is the chance that they might not implement some of our recommendations, at
Yes.
which point we will be in a position of saying that there's non-compliance.
Yes, but they haven't, their compliance monitoring period doesn't end until December, so we have some time to work with them.
Okay.
And like I said, we have had contact from them to request, a conference call WebEx, which I believe is scheduled for either this week or next week, to go over next steps and what needs to be done and how they can, demonstrate compliance, parallel practices, whatever it may be, to ensure that the standards are met.
Would you do me a favor and report specifically on it in August at the next meeting?
Yep.
Thank you.
Will do.
They have, they've hired, recently they have hired like a specific chief of diversity, EO compliance, correct?
My understanding is that the EEO officer that was in place last time is the same EEO officer. Now, if there's someone else on the EEO team that is going to be working on the audit, we haven't been advised of that yet, but perhaps that may be the case, perhaps that may be on the call. But I'll definitely inquire and find out if that is a person who's going to be working with us on the audit, or if it's going to be strictly the EEO officer, which is who we usually work with when we're doing audits.
For purposes of clarification, this is the sexual harassment audit.
Mhm.
It is following up in some sense, although we began it before the legislation from the city council. But it is city council legislation that mandates, duties on every entity within the city of New York as to sexual harassment. And so, I find some of their, actions on our own audit on sexual harassment somewhat abusive. To be kind to it.
Well, at least we have open lines of communication, and we'll continue to pursue those channels.
Yes, well, we do everything in our power as the EPC, and not just with the city council, but with all entities, to work with the agencies to help them get into compliance with our standards, to help them, establish new practices or, fine tune existing practices. So, on our part, we will do everything we can, just like with any other agency, to work with them and get this wrapped up.
We don't want to find anybody in
No,
non-compliance.
no, and that's
And when we say our standards, the standards that we apply are the standards of the federal, state, city government. It's not anything that we
No.
have made up.
No, the
We are
EPC
merely
standards are,
following the
The
legal
statutory,
standards.
There's-
Statutory standards.
Yeah.
yeah, they're predicated on state, federal, and city law and best practices, so they are universal standards that we apply to all agencies. And we have stressed to the city council, as well as every other agency, we're not here to play gotcha, we're not here to find you in non-compliance, we're here to help, basically close any blind spots that you might have, or help you implement things that you didn't realize you needed implementing, or, help you eradicate practices that you shouldn't be participating in. Our goal is not to punish, our goal is to get everyone a certificate of compliance, because that's what's best for the city of New York.
Well, in fact, our goal is to make sure that every employee is benefited by the rules.
Exactly.
Our basic mission is to make sure that there's an equal employment workforce.
Yes, for prospective and for current employees. Now, if there's no further discussion, we have a motion, we have a second, all in favor of the determination, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All abstained? Hearing none, the motion passes. Next, we have a compliance update by our agency counsel and director of compliance, Jennifer Shaw.
So I'm happy to report that we have 7 compliance resolutions on today's agenda, which means that for the 2020 audit plan and the 2021 audit plan, we only have 7 agencies left in compliance monitoring, and it is July. We are up to number 46, compliance resolution 46 for the year, which is way past our.
Mind-boggling.
It's way past our we aim to be around between 32 to 35. So we're at 46 and it's only July. So I'm very proud of our staff. Our analysts have been working very hard to put, get the agency's audits completed quickly and help the agencies get into compliance as soon as possible. So, like I said, after this we only have 7 audits left in compliance monitoring. And I'm hoping that half of them will be on next month's agenda. I'm aiming high, but everybody on the team kind of has the same goal. We want to wrap this up as soon as we can. So, if there's no.
It's amazing that you've been able to accomplish this during COVID.
Thank
For
you.
the record,
Thank you.
it is really quite
Thank you.
amazing because you've been doing it without having your employees in place. They are all remote, all over the place. As is all the materials, they have to audit and see.
I have to commend the EPC staff, our EO analysts, and Fatima, who also works on audits, have been very adept at kind of going with the flow as things change, helping the agencies with workarounds. If you can't give us this, then maybe you can give us that. When you're back in the office, give us this. Helping them figure out what they need to get for us so that it's not time wasted when they are in the office for that limited amount of time. They've been very professional, very cooperative, very courteous. I am extremely proud of our audit team. They've been doing a great job. They continue to do a great job, and that is why we're at compliance number 46, which I think, if all goes well, we will probably have the most compliance resolutions this year
That you have ever had.
in the history of the EPC.
So what are you gonna do post-COVID when they're back together? I'm sorry, I'm teasing.
Believe it or
So-
not, we've been able to really be very efficient working from home and kind of doing things electronically, and like I said, having workarounds where normally we would say, put everything in our system and then we'll review it. We're doing preliminary, unofficial reviews via email to keep the process going until they can upload things to our official system. So it's been interesting, but I think that the team is very much on board with the ultimate goals of the agency, and like I said, I'm very proud of the people I work with.
Absolutely. Please communicate to the EPC staff who's actually can hear us. I want to reiterate some of the sentiments that we mentioned at last month's meeting. Our gratitude and mindfulness of the difficult situations they had to endure in the last year and a half or more with the pandemic, but yet and still their performance has been extraordinary in regards to meeting benchmarks and achieving goals, and that's not we can never state that enough in terms of how important that is. So we want to thank the EPC staff, many of them who are listening in.
Absolutely, thank you.
And we have similar things to be thankful for later on as we hear about the conclusion of a very important research project that just was submitted. So we're all happy to see that work moving along. Next we have
We have to read the resolutions into place.
yes.
Would you like me to read them?
Yes, please.
Okay, so the 7 resolutions, compliance resolutions up for vote are resolution 2021 AP/250-441, parens 2021 C40, which is the Queens Community Board number 11. Resolution 2021 AP/250-439, parens 2021 C41, Queens Community Board number 9. Resolution 2020 AP/250-469-2021 C42, which is LaGuardia Community College. Resolution 2021 AP/250-341, parens 2021 C43, which is Manhattan Community Board number 1. Resolution 2021 250-342, parens 2021 C44, which is Manhattan Community Board number 2. Resolution 2021-AP/250-433, parens 2021 C45, Queens Community Board Number 3, and Resolution 2020 AP/250-902, parens 2021 C46, Office of the Bronx County District Attorney.
So
Thank you.
moved.
Do we have a motion to adopt the resolutions as a bundle?
So moved.
Commissioner Reese moves, do we have a second?
Second.
Commissioner Alcantara seconds. Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Abstentions? Hearing none, the motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have, next order on the agenda is, section 7, subsection A, on research update, the status of local law 13 report. Woo-hoo! Woo-hoo! Can we say a woo-hoo?
Yes, the official notification that the 2021 Racial and Ethnic Classification Report has been completed and uploaded to the New York City Government Publications Portal website. This is the first of 10 annual reports and really serves as a baseline for future analysis of underutilization in subsequent years. We've already begun our efforts on the year 2 report, which is due in February of 2022. Our plan is to drill down into specific titles so that we can better understand the successes and challenges that are associated with underutilization at a more granular level. We will also explore the success of the corrective actions issued by the EEPC and the extent by which the corrective actions have helped to address underutilization in a particular job group. Further, over time, each of the
The chair
mandates.
recognizes Commissioner Reese, but please let Dr. Campbell Boone finish and then I'll call him.
Okay,
Okay.
fine, thank you.
Further, over time, each of the mandates of Local Law 13 will be addressed, and it will provide for us a solid foundation for making the recommendations for change. I would certainly like to thank each person that have played a role in helping to develop this report. Certainly, Ms. Fatima Dudnoff, who is the research assistant, and each of you represented in this room for the creation of this initial report.
Thank you. Commissioner Reese?
To the extent that the response from the law department alters the given in this report, we might be analyzing more entities going forward. So I would think therefore, since that new report's due in February, that the sooner you could get to the law department with some, and they're gonna be time driven because Corp Council will change in January. So you really want to see if you can get a response within a short period of time. Because she's gonna need it if there are any changes here. That's why I raised my hand at that point in time.
Absolutely.
I can tell you that we have 74 entities that were included in this study to date, but that does not mean that there will be 74 going forward. I know of at least one more agency that's going to be included in the report, and that's the EEPC.
Okay, it should be.
Yes.
No, but so I guess, my sense is that the two are so interrelated, but we need to know the answer to that.
Yes, absolutely.
Because otherwise this necessarily, if you're drilling down, you could probably avoid some or not. It depends on who it is.
Good question. Do these apply only to city employees?
City employees, it would be, the entities that we have are the 74 entities that fall up under the jurisdiction of the EEPC. Those entities that we have the data most readily available.
Okay.
So in all, I'm hesitant to say all, but in most of the entities, they would be considered city employees.
I
But
think overall
the
the city-
issue of what's available in the labor market
Mhm.
is not limited to city employees. So let's assume there are no female architects in the Department of City Planning. There may well be female architects that are available, only city planning hasn't hired them. So this report is a report dealing with underutilization within the city, but the only way you can do it is to find out who's available. So the
And we're
availability
gonna have a presentation soon as part of our, learning series, coming up in less than
Okay, fine,
minutes.
I'll shut up. I was just responding to
But
the
in
question.
general, I think, give and take, if you look at the New York City municipal labor force as constituting 335,000, people, this, report, in terms of the agencies looked at, gets us somewhere around 194,000 in terms of the data, so it's the database here, so it's huge. And with that said, we want to reiterate as a board to Dr. Leticia Gamble Boone, that, we know this was a Herculean effort, right? It required a lot of moving parts. The first of 10 reports that the local law requires of us, during the course of the next 10 years. And very much as you stated, this is an excellent baseline to begin with. And I know you work collaboratively and closely with other colleagues, and particularly with colleagues in other agencies, like with DCAS, which I know your executive director, Jean Victor, is really, adamant about having the EPC now kind of get, outside of ourselves and really collaborate and work closely with other similar-minded agencies and groups. And with that said, I'm happy that the report is going to be distributed wider and farther, and as we've already begun distributing it to not only the mayor's office, the city council, the two entities that by statute you have to report it to, but we also have sent it to different commissions. And I think Jean has a list of some of those commissions and individuals within those commissions that we've sent it to. So if you could just state that so that others can know that we're broadcasting the work of the EPC broader and farther and to the stakeholders.
But I wish to interrupt because this was a mandate without any financial backing to it.
Yes, an unfunded mandate.
It was an unfunded mandate.
Is it distributed to all the different participants in the study or not?
Not individual agencies, but I'll let the executive director speak to that.
And it would be made available, it's going to be posted, so, it's available to anybody that wants to take a look at it.
Okay.
But we specifically sent it out, to the Committee on Civil and Human Rights, the Committee on Civil Service and Labor, the Committee on Women and Gender Equity, the Racial Justice Commission, the Commission on Gender Equity, the New York City Law Department, New York City Human Rights Commission, the City, Civil Service Commission. We sent it to DCAS, and we also sent it to the city community colleges.
So this is an effort to get the work out to a wider audience, and as Commissioner Reese hinted to, there'll be large-scale change in January 2022. So for example, the City Council Committee on Civil and Human Rights, the 5 members who are sitting on that committee, none of the 5 members will be in the City Council, I believe. They've been terminated out or such. So the relationships have to be built anew. The learning curve will start anew as well in many instances. So the fact that we have this, grounding research and baseline research is something that we'll have to repeatedly share with people. So we're going to be prepared to share it again as the members change in the different committees. Commissioner Reese?
Sometimes, maybe one of the things we've never done, which is that you as chair might want to reach out to each of the new city council groups that has jurisdiction over, just to introduce you and the executive director to them in the very beginning as they're getting their feet wet, so that they know when we exist, what our charter is, without there being misunderstanding to it, and that we're there to help. But would you report to them? And maybe we won't get as many mandates that are unfunded.
Yes, and to share, we've discussed that. We're currently going to be working on a stakeholders analysis and a stakeholders mapping, right, to map the landscape, and as well as a logic model to better understand impact, which we're all deeply concerned about. What is the ultimate impact of this work? So once we have those 2 documents, we'll be in better position to take it on the road and meet the different, people with, different
Good
stakeholders.
idea.
So,
Well, there are also gonna be 5 new borough presidents.
yes.
And while they don't necessarily have the same sort of legislative impact they once did, I think it might not be a bad idea to also introduce yourself to them as well.
And that also reminds me, probably, it didn't make it into the minutes, I guess, but old business, but we discussed the absence of a gender analysis and how that was unacceptable. And we're going to be writing to the, particularly the commission that has oversight that did the law to begin with, to include and amend the local law to include explicitly a gender analysis and a
Make
gender
me go
overlay.
crazy.
And we've communicated already with Councilwoman Helen Rosenthal, who would be happy to carry that legislation or in terms of amending that law. So many of you do know the next city council will be majority women for the first time in the history of New York City. And I think the proactiveness of the EPC to make sure that oversight gets secured earlier than later.
And one of whom is a
very
repeater.
important.
Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer served
Correct.
in the city council before she went to become Manhattan Borough President.
Correct.
What about other groups? Do they look into disability, LGBTQ, and things of that nature, or that will come in a separate report?
That could be, this is the first of 10 reports.
Okay.
So that may be, and in terms of the what you call special issue audits, I believe we call them, or special topic, right? How many of those topics are there so far? Is this just sexual
We just
harassment?
did one on sexual
Sexual
harassment.
harassment, is there,
That's the first.
have there been any done on, the disability or disabled community or LGBTQ?
I believe that we did, and this was a while ago, an accessibility audit to determine, accessibility for, persons with disabilities. But that was done quite some time ago, if at all.
I don't think it's the special audit was ever done on that.
Because I recall reading something and
We kept looking at it as part of what we did under the regular audit, but
it was never a standalone audit.
It's a great question, Commissioner Alcantara, and that's something that we will be able to explore in the upcoming reports as a topic. Next, we have the Section 8 EEPC Learning Series, which I'm very excited about. And then we have Dr. Leticia Gambo Boom.
Awesome. So I believe that learning should be fun. So we're going to do something. I'm going to ask you to pull out your phones if you have it, and I'll tell you what you're going to do with it in just a few seconds. But this is the first iteration of the EEPC Learning Series. I'm going to focus today
Is there something gonna
on,
be
that
done?
is correct.
Okay,
It's,
yeah.
I'm going to show it up there. I'm going to focus on underutilization. So, why is underutilization important? According to Monica Cox, who is a professor of engineering education at Ohio State, underutilization is one of the tools that can be used to end performative allyship. She says, instead of showing me your diversity statement, show me your hiring data, your discrimination claim stats, your salary tables, your retention numbers, your diversity policies, and your leaders' public actions against racism in performative allyship. But for the EEPC, it provides for us a data set to assess and improve our employment practices in New York City. So any opportunity that you have to learn, we certainly want to make sure that there is mastery of content. So I do have a learning outcome, and that is each EEPC learning participant will earn a minimum score of 70% on the underutilization post-test. Now, I really believe that we're going to have 100% mastery, but we always want
I
to
at least get a C.
absolutely. We always want to, put the bar there. So, if you have school-aged children, you've probably seen or heard of Kahoot. If not, it is a very simple tool that I'm going to ask you to use. So, if you would go to your browser and put in Kahoot it. Kahoot.it. Kahoot.it. You
Don't
can bring
have
your
my
phone.
I left my phone at my desk.
Kahoot.it. So let me know. Actually,
Oh, do we have Wi-Fi?
you.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
We don't have Wi-Fi,
Oh, you don't?
so we do not.
Hold on, he's uploading, let's see. Okay, got it.
Awesome. So I'm going to ask you to put this pin in.
It's not
with-
opening. So,
197, this
Mhm.
one?
Yes,
Give it-
197
give it some time, I guess.
571.
So you want us to put that number in? where it
Yes,
says delete
please.
pen?
Yes. Now it's also going to ask you to put in your nickname. Now this is the time that you can use your alter ego. You know, so like Beyonce has Sasha Fierce. It's really not important for us to say who earned what score. Really, we just want to make sure that you're able to get it.
well,
Are you able to get it,
I
Commissioner? There you go.
Oh, you're right.
There you go. Awesome.
All right,
Awesome.
I'm okay.
So once you log on,
I'm connecting, it says.
okay, awesome.
And it says nickname.
Yes, so you can put your real name or you can put your alter ego name up.
Where we at?
Awesome, awesome, awesome.
Ah, will they publish my score?
This is only internal.
Ah, okay.
So it's going to show your score, but it
No, I'm thinking about changing it in case.
Understood. All good stuff. Are we ready?
Ready?
Awesome. So what you're going to do is select the color that best represents the answer. True or false? Underutilization and underrepresentation can be used interchangeably. Underutilization and underrepresentation can be used interchangeably.
Hold on, it's not connecting.
I've answered.
Just hit
It doesn't tell me whether I'm right or wrong.
There you go. Three of us are right, so.
3. That's okay. If you don't get it this go round, we'll get it the next time. So
Okay.
this gives you an idea of what the score is so far. Next question. Underutilization focuses on which category in the workforce? Racial categories, gender categories, racial and gender categories, LGBTQIA+ categories. Underutilization focuses on which category in the workplace? Racial, gender, racial and gender, or LGBTQIA? Okay. Next one, true or false? The EEPC calculates underutilization for the New York City workforce. The EEPC calculates underutilization for the New York City workforce. True or false? When utilization is present, it means, when underutilization is present, it means white males are in the majority in the workforce population. I can't read, obviously, I don't have my glasses on, so you see it's kind of easy closer to the screen. Black females are in the majority in the workforce. Protected classes are much smaller than available workers in the labor market, none of the above. Awesome. Last question, true or false? Adverse impact uses data to show how employment practices negatively impact a protected class. Adverse impact uses data to show how employment practices negatively impact a protected class. Okay, so this is where we are. Congratulations to JV at the conclusion of our pre-test. Now we're going to take a post-test to see if there is growth. So, underutilization. This is the language that we use relative to the local law 13 report, but I'm going to share with you a more technical term where underutilization can be viewed as a condition where there are fewer minorities and or women in a particular job group in the city's municipal workforce than would be reasonably expected when compared to the availability of minorities and or women in a qualified labor pool. So for us, DCAS conducts the underutilization studies for New York City entities, and they provide this information on the SEEDS 961 report. We receive this report quarterly, and they use data from the U.S. Census, Civil Service List, external labor pools, internal discretionary pools to generate the availability weights. So,
We have a question.
I'm sorry, yes.
This is based on a historical fact. Do we know how recent the SEEDS data is and how up to date it is? Is it it's the last census, right? And so
That's
it will
correct.
be redone. So the SEEDS data right now is 10 years old.
That's correct. And the DCAS has acknowledged that that's one of the shortcomings of the availability weights. We talked about that in our conversation. And we also denoted that in the local law 13 report that the data is from the last census. But of course the new census is coming out and we
We'll get
expect
different data.
that, correct.
Just because my recollection is, and Angela's still here, but at one point we were operating at the SEEDS data was 10 years old
Mhm.
and it was 20 years old. So we just have to make sure that DCAS is indeed keeping up to date on the SEEDS data. This is just history, bad history, but history nonetheless, Jim.
Commissioner Alejandro?
Yes. Just to clarify it myself. So underutilization is the workforce as a function of the available workforce.
Yes.
While underrepresentation is the workforce as a function of the number of people in the city of New York?
So, you're getting one step ahead.
Okay.
That's the next
Got it. Okay.
part of this conversation, because in many instances, people believe that underutilization and underrepresentation,
Understand.
those terms can be used interchangeably, but that's not the case.
Okay.
So, underrepresentation is a condition where there are substantially fewer minorities and or women in a job area. So,
As
you're looking,
related to whom?
I'm sorry?
As a function of whom?
Of what is expected in the workforce. But the difference is, and this is my overly simplified way of looking at it, underutilization is calculated. It results from a statistical score, and I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. But underrepresentation is basically what you think. So you're thinking that there should be more women
painters.
in
You
correct.
think there should be more women rich painters because there's so many women in the population. But in fact, based on the availability, there aren't because they haven't been trained to be
So then-
painters.
It's a function of the number of either minorities or women in the population.
Correct.
So that, I'm putting
Correct.
my formula, otherwise I don't.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, that's the formula.
Right.
So-
So
But before, in the utilization, I can see how census data
Mhm.
is relevant for the underrepresentation. formula, right, or
Mhm.
what you're dividing by. I don't see how the census data is relevant to the underutilization formula when you're looking at availability, which is, I suppose, the applicant pool, and those hired off of the applicant pool. It seems like the census data had nothing to do with that.
But the
When they
census
use
data
the
will
word
tell you what
census,
your
they
skill
mean-
set is.
They got that.
The
The
census
census
tells you-
data tells you the census data tells you whether, it's not only that I live here and I am, but I also fill out my skill, do I not?
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, but that's, so what I'm saying, then there's no reason for the census data to be old, because the decennial census does not ask you what your skill sets are or any of that. The American Community Fact Finder does, which is done every 3 years, and that's not a full head count. So that's why I just want to be really clear, because sometimes people use the word census, like in prisons and other people, just to let you know what the census of the school is, what the census of the applicant pool is, what the and that's separate from a census, the U.S. Census Bureau.
But I think we are talking about the census from the U.S. Census Bureau. It's my understanding that they do ask some people questions, not
Yes,
everybody.
in the short form.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
That's where you find, I mean, that's where, certainly where
I
some
know
of
that I
it
use
comes
the
from.
census data to gather career information.
Right.
So I don't know which form, how often, but
Yeah,
I've seen
that-
that they do. So
Yeah,
maybe
that
it's
would
what
not
you
come
say.
from the decennial.
No,
The
I don't
decennial
think
only
it
has
comes.
those 13 questions, and it's not.
Okay.
But so this is which one then? Is this, the underutilization, you're dividing what by what?
So, the actual calculation of the, of underutilization, that figure is actually calculated by DCAS. They actually conduct the underutilization study. But they're looking at availability, as it relates to, there are a couple of different categories. So they're looking at civil service lists, they're looking at labor pools, they're looking at internal promotional data. That's the information that they're using to calculate underutilization as it relates to what's available in the workforce. Then they're looking at who was actually encumbered, or who's actually being utilized in the workforce. That is the formula that's used to calculate underutilization.
Yeah,
So,
I don't think
I-
it's, so I would like, and then I'll turn to Commissioner Cantor. So that's the part that last month I mentioned too, is what I had confusion about, specifically in relation to a previous report on occupational segregation.
Mm-hmm.
So I just wanted to reconcile that, so if you can find out from them, availability, like the word availability, does that mean people who are qualified and willing and able to work?
Mm-hmm.
Which means that's completely within their control, because those are people filling out, either taking the competitive exams, filling out some form, has nothing to do with the census. It's just, it's a census of people able, willing, and qualified to work, but it's nothing to do with the Census Bureau. And whether they're dividing that by the people then encumbered or hired. And then the difference, if it's deviates by standard deviations from what that pool would suggest should be the composition of those hired, then that's how you have underutilization. So that's what, I wanted to clear up. To
But when you
understand
reference specifically the civil service list, that's one pool, but there are other pools that are looked at as well. They're looking at internal pools to see what the available pool is within the workforce. So it's not just looking at the civil service list, but it's a comprehensive list that they use, and there are weights that are associated to each of the job groups within those labor pools. So I'm also going to talk.
No, I was gonna say that it seems to me, based on the previous information, that underutilization is the workforce divided by the available workforce. The issue that you're raising is, how do you determine who's available to do whatever work? Because I could be, in my case, I'm an engineer, but I have a PhD in education, so which category would Minoska fall in? And how do they determine that is what is the X in our equation? From now they cite CEEDS 96 one, which I don't know who CC, who they are, but if we get that report, we
Mhm.
might be able to talk.
Oh, we actually have the report.
Ah,
It
even
is-
better.
It is this, that is the information that served as the basis for this report.
Ah, okay.
Yes, so, we get the SEEDS report quarterly,
Okay.
and
Okay.
it walks us through,
And who sees?
the citywide data systems. I'm sorry, I
Okay.
don't have actually it's in the.
It's in the report.
It's in the
Okay.
report.
And is that report,
And I think that's. what
included
we
here?
need.
No.
No, but the
Okay.
data from
Your
that
side
report
is,
is
okay.
Right.
there too.
It's
And
the-
that's, the seeds is what we submit to the federal government, what DCAS submits to the federal
Okay.
government as part of EO compliance, correct?
There is a report that they submit
Yes,
to the federal
the other
government.
one.
Yes. SEED stands for the Citywide Equal Employment Database Systems. So this is the report that we
Okay.
get from them quarterly, where there is, they show underutilization. They also show 4/5 rule, which I'm gonna talk about in just a few minutes.
Okay.
But it really is their way of demonstrating what the workforce looks like as it relates to availability. And it then also shows us what the utilization is, which is the number of employees that are encumbered in New York City. So, in doing the underutilization study, there is a calculation. And this calculation basically says if the results show that there is minus 1.96, if that is the score that is found, then underutilization is present. If the score is 1.96 positive, then overutilization is present. And what that basically means is there is something that's in the practices that may warrant additional study and or review. So if a particular job group or a particular gender is found to have underutilization, then what that does is provides for the entity a reason to go and look further at their employment practices. So they may want to see, are you going out to recruit with women's organizations within the city? Are you going and are you looking at what your selection processes are? So if underutilization is present, what it provides for us is a way to go back and do further study. So that's the information that DCAS provides for us. That's the information that we use in our auditing process, and also what served as a foundation for.
Can I ask a question?
Mhm.
Given that these tables and this information is a function of the availability of the workforce,
Yes.
who looks into the implicit biases in those underutilizations? And I'm asking because I work in a field that if you were to look at the availability of the workforce among Latina or among women in construction, it's gonna be super low. But then, if you compare the super low to the workforce itself, I might be shown to be overutilized because of the two people that show I hired the two, we're doing great. So who looks into that other aspect of
We don't.
these populations? Oh, we don't.
We
Okay.
don't look into biases, so
Okay.
inherently, what we are looking in is to the data, the fact of, the issue of why it got there
Yeah,
is not our mission. Our
Okay.
mission is to expose the fact that it exists.
okay, perfect.
And then it's the issue of how you alter that is based on what we say you gotta fix it.
Okay,
Now, fixing it means to either, in some manner, deal with the bias. So,
okay.
if we look at, I'm interrupting the discussion here, but if you look at pages 15, 16, 17 of this report, it indicates what we found is underutilization, and I'm very quickly going to make an assumption that what you find is a whole lot of black people being underrepresented. Now,
Okay.
is that based on an inherent bias, or is it because we don't know why it happened, it just happened in those titles? I would also say that if we pulled out and we did fire department and police and added it all together, we wouldn't be surprised by what it said. There've been several lawsuits that are public and that have not apparently altered the fact that the inherent underutilization of this minority continues to be there. So, our job is to expose the data.
Okay.
You are dealing to what I think is far more subtle.
Yes.
Hard to explain it. Having been part of several smashed glass ceilings, I can tell you, you can't exactly tell why, and
Yeah.
it happens to some people and it doesn't, and sometimes nobody tells you when you're the only woman in the room that somehow you broke through it and there you are, and the next time round, half the room is full of women, and so you can't, whether you did something right or wrong, you don't know, but it's changed. So our role is merely to expose the data, and that's what we've been asked to do.
I'd like to, add a caveat and see if the EPC staff, could add nuance to it. So it's, I would say that the mandate is for us to not only expose, potential areas of further investigation, but the mandate, statutorily is to offer recommendations so that, to the extent that these, there are barriers that might correlate, and maybe even causally, I know you have to get into multiple regression and other things for that, but are related to the outcome, that is within our purview to offer recommendations, corrective action, and suggestions in that regard. Is that fair to say?
Well, but to add to it, within our mission is to do education. So we have used our semi-annual, if you will, conferences to begin to talk to the issue that you're raising. So you can have professors coming in and talking about the fact that I will try to hire more people like me because I'm comfortable with people like me. That's the subtle nature of what you're talking about. We can educate that that's part of what may be happening, but all we can show is the data of what has happened.
Okay, but we can also, arguably, to the extent, let's say from the previous report, that, plumbers and electricians are 92% male. And there's no reason to believe that randomly, given the demographics of gender and male, that was occurred accidentally, right? So then when you reverse engineer that, is within the purview, and it's safe to say, correct me if I'm wrong, that maybe the EPC determined that there's something about the job description, or there's something about that maybe you have to lift 110 pounds of dead weight. That may no longer be the case in 2021. So we can offer recommendations for legislation to maybe change, job descriptions and other things. Not easily done,
But you're
right?
now talking about unions and.
Yeah, no, not easily done, collective bargaining.
No, 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 no,
But what I'm
that's-
saying is within the scope and purview
Yeah.
of dealing with systemic issues of
Okay.
bias, that this body can offer what may be best practices, what may be recommendations, and what in fact may lead to legislation. And I think when we're operating optimally, and why many of us came here and got into this calling or profession, those kind of impact and outcomes are some that move the needle are the ones that we're all very much purposely and passionately aligned with. So I just wanted, to just put that out there.
And I think, Chair, we can get to that, if you conduct studies like the 4/5 rule, because that's going to allow you the opportunity to look at your selection criteria to see if there was adverse impact on any particular group. So without going through the nuances of how to calculate the 4-pitch rule, but know that that is another way for you to assess if there is adverse impact for any particular group. Now, this approach is less statistically significant, but it is one that can be used as a sound defense in a court case. So it is another way for looking at
What is the four fees? I don't know that rule.
I'm sorry?
What's the
What is
rule?
the four fees rule?
So it reads here, and I have a video, but the video is about 5 minutes long, and I just wanted.
You could just send us the link.
Okay, perfect,
Yeah.
perfect. But it actually walks you through how to use your selection process to consider whether or not there was adverse impact on a particular group. So if we find that lifting sandbags is a factor that impacts women, has an adverse impact on women, then that's something that could be explored. So again, this is another way that entities can use data to improve their practices, hopefully to make it a better workplace within that particular entity.
Again, based on history, several of the women within the fire department came to visit us saying that the fire department was utilizing its own test and its own exercise test that was not part of standard fire department tests, and that was resulting in less women being hired. So it's your sandbag test, if you
So
will.
what is the four fees?
They were suing the
It's a
fire
rule,
department.
it's
I
another
don't know the results
calculation
of
to
that
determine
lawsuit.
adverse
But
underutilization.
clearly,
I'll share
that
with
is
you.
an
Okay.
issue with some of the city entities as to what the testing is.
So this brings my presentation to a close. So now what I'd like to do is to assess growth. So we're going to go back and.
But hold on. So what is the four fees rule?
So
What does that mean?
So the technical definition of it is if the selection rate for a certain group is less than 80%
Okay,
of that group with the highest selection rate, there is adverse impact on that group. So there is a calculation that you would go through to look at your selection process. You'd look at all of the applicants in the pool. You would look at all, you'd see what was the selection rate for whatever group. If it was white males, then that would be the basis that you would use. And then you would look at it and assess the selection rates of others, and then determine if that 80% is present. So I have a worksheet here that actually walks through the process.
Oh, okay.
But again, just in the respect of time, I'll just share it with you.
okay,
That's
thank you.
I just wanted to note too that I thought it was really, really interesting that when I looked at the data, white males in city government are equal or maybe even slightly less than black employees in city government. So in other words, you have maybe a few more black employees in city government than you have white employees. And I was just really shocked by that because I haven't seen that anywhere until now, which to me plays an impact on that 80% rule, the 4/5 rule, because you're comparing the protected class against the non-protected class. And now that if black employees outnumber white employees, is that rule really going to work?
But that turns not to be based on when I was looking at the pages on some of the titles. So the issue then becomes, I mean, my question, which is why I got so angry when women weren't in it, is that because there's a preponderance of black females within the city rather than black males.
That could very well be.
I mean, my guess, based on my tummy, is that's what we're gonna find. But my tummy is not a data point. But I think, Gina, I think that's what's gonna end up finding.
That may very well be. And I've spoken with the chair about how we're going to address women, and we're going to, he's been having conversations with people in city council. They were shocked at the oversight and appreciated it being pointed out.
Oh, they don't collect the data for women
No,
versus.
it's collected, it wasn't called forth.
They didn't ask
Registration.
us to call for it, so we don't have it in this report, breaking
Okay.
it out. And that's why we don't have the answer to the question I just posed. That's my guess, as I said, it's my tummy guess, but I can't answer.
And the gender analysis becomes, even more important, right? Most of, given what we just went through, with the pandemic
Yeah,
and the disproportionate impacts and the decisions that women have to make in the labor force.
Yeah.
So that's why we really need that information.
It does matter, and it matters for lots of different reasons, but it also matters in promotion. So the issue, I mean, as you look here and you look in manager, it also makes a great deal of difference based on promotion. So at what level are all of these people?
yeah.
Right.
And, where are they within the hierarchy?
So I'm thinking we really need to look at the feeder groups that are going into those
Right.
titles.
Right. Yep.
Okay, so if we could quickly do our assessment.
Want me back?
Please. We
Oh,
want to
dear.
Do we
see
log in?
if.
I lost the
Do we log in
last time.
again, or?
Yes, please.
Oh,
So we
dear,
go back to
want
the
me
I'm
to
gonna
play
bow out
again?
of that.
I don't know.
So you're in.
But my webinar is gonna end in a few minutes
Okay.
because I didn't know it was gonna go this long, so I have to get everybody done.
They're trying to reconnect. Okay. Says I'm in second place. Right. I'm on.
Okay, hold on. Do I have to get out and start again?
Yes,
Ah, okay.
please.
In case anybody's interest is lunchtime.
Okay, I'm in.
Awesome.
Alright. Do we know at what time Arva has to leave?
I'm not sure, but I think, I suspect we're almost.
Yeah, this will take us about 2 minutes at
Okay.
most.
I don't wanna lose Arva.
Okay, I'm clean.
Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and get us started and just
Okay.
continue should you desire.
Okay. Okay.
Same questions. Underutilization and underrepresentation can be used interchangeably. True or false? Awesome.
Why isn't that? I'm not on or something.
Underutilization focuses on which category in the workforce? Racial categories, gender categories, racial and gender categories, LGBTQIA categories.
What was the game pin again, dear? What was the number?
You can it's right there at the bottom.
Got it.
881335.
Thank you.
Thank you.
True or false? The EEPC calculates underutilization for the New York City workforce. False. We know that TCAS can calculate that information for us. When underutilization is present, it means
I'm gonna go to my desk and send another one.
white males are in the minority of the workforce population. Black females are the majority of the workforce population. Protected classes are much smaller than available workers in the labor market. None of the above. uses data to show how employment practices negatively impact a protected class.
I thought mine was freezing.
Okay. So I will do the calculation and our top person,
Commissioner Alcantara.
how about that? So, anytime that there's an opportunity for learning, one should always assess that learning. That is a way of demonstrating that the content was mastered. While this information is information that we all use, hopefully it was helpful to deepen your understanding of underutilization. And certainly, Chair, I will go back and look at the request that you've made, and I will send out the link that further explains what the fourth is,
Can you share the presentation and the link that you said about the 4/5?
Yes,
Thank
yes,
you.
yes, I absolutely.
Yes, thank you for the presentation, for making it so interactive. The underutilization, I think, formula and the underrepresentation formula, I think is very helpful because of how availability is understood. So, when you look at the bell-shaped graph and underutilization, I'm thinking, let's say, Asians in the sanitation department, right, they come out underutilized, and as a result of this report effort, let's say there's a big effort of recruiting of Asian Americans in terms of so then their percentage in applicant pool of qualified and available, let's say if recruitment is very successful, then it's larger than their percentage in the population, right? But, if they get hired at a higher rate because they're trying to make up for, let's say, underrepresentation in an agency, then they get dinged as being overrepresented in relation to the
In a lower title.
So that's what I'm trying to figure out.
But they come in a lower title, so that they won't have a seniority in the upper title.
Well,
I think a piece of what is of interest to me is the management titles in this all. And where the people are within the management titles.
But
So you see,
the definition of availability will be, consistent across all titles, I guess, in groups. So it's very important for us to really understand that.
There are some differences in the weights, the availability weights, but certainly the formula is the same.
And whether census means U.S. Census Bureau data or census means the data under the ownership of DCAS because they are the custodian, taker of all employee entities.
well, the
Thank you.
10-year lapse in it makes me think it's related to US Census. That would be the only reason that we elapse at that length of time.
For an underrepresentation analysis, or maybe not for an underutilization analysis, but that's what we're gonna.
So if I could just point something out. So with underrepresentation, it really, while it's a calculation, it is what's expected, but not necessarily using the same weights that were used in the underutilization calculation. So you may just say that there should be more women painters. I just feel like there should be more women painters because women are underrepresented in the painting title. Whereas if you're looking at underutilization, it is a study with a calculated score that says if underutilization has been determined, then there's something that warrants additional study. So again, my overly simplified definition, underrepresentation is based upon what you think, but underutilization is actually using a calculated score to determine the adverse impact.
Yeah. I mean, there's some analogy, right? So and I know you're familiar with this, to university admissions.
Mm-hmm.
You can't hire who hasn't applied.
Correct.
You can't admit who hasn't applied. So I think there's a, so while, you know, you might think that the student body or the workforce is not representative of the community demographics, right? But that's one question, right? And then that's the representation question. And utilization question, is it reflective at least of the people who apply? So that's what we're trying to find out.
Well, I'm glad this report is finished and
Yes.
published.
Yes.
So thank you.
And again, we want to reiterate our thanks and appreciation for the Herculean work that this report took, and the quality and how great it is. And we hope that it's going to be read wide and far, and it has impact. Next, we have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
So moved by Commissioner Reese enthusiastically. We have a second.
Yes.
Commissioner Alcantara has a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, hearing none, the motion is adjourned. And while it says executive session as section 10, I don't believe we have executive session.
I don't think we have any items tonight.
Correct, thank you. So we're
So
adjourned.
are we
Thank you.
closing, we have to close